Hey everyone, it's Mr. Souther coming at you with a video on the Unit 6 Practice FRQ. So I'm going to go through pretty quickly what we're doing with the Practice FRQ so you can kind of go through yourself and basically see how you did. First things first, I'm going to go through this and I'll show you what I did in class and then I'll go to the code. I went through and I marked up my entire FRQ. And the idea here is I want to know, like, what are the conditions? So just to paint the picture here, you can read the context as well. But we basically are coding with a smart thermostat. It is going to create, you can see with this constructor, right? An object that's going to include the hour, the minute, the degrees, and the mode, which is hot or cool. Hours is in military time or 24-hour clock, 0 to 23. Minutes is obviously from 0 to 59. We don't include 60 because that would roll over to the next hour. Okay. There are a couple key methods, and the AP exam and the College Board and the everybody tries not to waste too much time. So when you see these methods, there's a good chance you're going to need to call them. Okay. So it's get hour, get minute, get temperature, get mode. So the first thing I did was I went ahead and looked at the next class called the I think this is zoomed in enough, called the schedule manager. And we're going to go ahead and identify that we have this array list called schedule. I'm going to need to use it. And then in part A, we're going to use this temperature action method. It's a void return type. And it's going to include a parameter called setting. All right. So then if you read through all of this, I'm going to walk you through kind of the answers here. When we get to the coding part, we basically are trying to find out what is in the array list called schedule, and then see if our new setting that we want to add to the program is actually coming before or after the existing times. So let's take a look. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and complete the add temperature action method. Let me try and move my document camera around a bit so it's a little bit easier. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we need to make sure that we know whether or not this temperature action object that we're putting in called setting, right? I'm going to go ahead and annotate here. That's my parameter. I need to know, has this been inserted yet or not? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and write down a new object or new variable called inserted, and it's a Boolean return type to see, or data type, and set it equal to false. So if none of my conditionals are triggered, then we're just going to go ahead and move through and return false, basically. Or we don't need to return false, we're just not going to do anything. Okay. But this is going to be helpful for my catch-all for the last if statement. I'll show you in a bit. First thing I got to do is, in order to traverse through an array list, is I need to come over and use a for loop. So I'm going to set up a for loop where int index equals 0. And the index is less than the schedule array list. Remember, that's the one that's given to us. The size. That should be a less than. And then we're going to go ahead and increment at the end of the for loop. Next thing I need to do is I need to find out, using the temperature action class, let's go ahead and create an object that I call check. And we're going to set that equal to whatever the schedule is, that array list, and we're going to do the get index. Now keep in mind that when you do the get index for the schedule array list, it is merely giving you the element for that index. And that element is an object, remember? So it's an array list of objects. So it's going to have hour, minutes, temperature, and the mode. So that's great. So keep in mind that check is just going to be including all 4 of those attributes. So I'm going to set that up. Now I can start looking at the conditionals, and this is where I'm going to need to use those other methods of get hour, get minutes. So I'm going to use this new variable I call check, or object called check, and I'm going to go ahead and use that to call the get hours method. And I'm going to find out, hey, are these hours that are already in the schedule, are those going to be greater than the setting dot get hours? Right. So in other words, is the new setting coming in as the parameter, is that hour earlier than what's already in the array list for that index I'm looking at? Okay. And we know that one of the conditions with the array list was it's already in numerical or chronological order. So if this is the case, then we know that my new setting is earlier than the current setting on that first index. The other thing I want to check too is whether or not we get a situation. I'm going to go ahead and use the parentheses. This should all be on one line, but I write too big. If I use check dot get hours, what if the hours matches what's in the setting, right? Oops, not schedule. I meant to say setting. Sorry about that. So it'd be setting dot get hours. Right. So in the event that both of these are equivalent for the hours, we also need to check, right? And I'll write the little ampersand, right? And the minutes are going to be different. So in this case, check.getMinutes, that's already in the schedule, is going to be later or greater than the setting.getMinutes. So when that's the case, now I want to trigger what happens next for my code, which is we're going to go ahead and add now at this point to the schedule. So I'm going to do schedule array list dot add, and we're going to add the index that we're on, the actual new setting that we have. All right, so we're going to go ahead and add that. And then I also need to go ahead and set inserted equal to true now, because it's been inserted. Okay, so then if this isn't the case, and I'll go ahead and close out this if loop because we have an else if coming up where we say, well, what if the hours are the exact same as the setting, the new setting that we have, dot get hours. So if that's the case, and at the same time, the minutes are the same for what we have in the schedule as they are for the setting, then in this case, you'll see in the prompt that you have to overwrite the current setting.
7 lesson 2.
And then in that case, we're going to go ahead and set, right? Because we need to overwrite that element in schedule using the index value that we have, the current setting that's coming in. So that's going to overwrite it. And then lastly, I need to set inserted equal to true and close out the for loop. Or sorry, the else if. Because now at the end of this for loop, we need to also check, we need to go ahead and close out this for loop. So I'm gonna do that because outside of this for loop, I'm gonna check and see, hey, is inserted still true or is it inserted still false or is it true? Well, if it is false, then we're gonna go ahead and now add that schedule or that setting all the way at the end. Recall that this add method adds that index or that element all the way at the end of the list, no matter what. Okay, so then for part B, what we're going to do is we're going to do two things. One is we need to return Boolean indicating whether the objects were removed, and then go ahead and remove it if the criteria, and I'm just going to read it word for word, if, or in a case where the mode equal to the given mode, and, so I'm just reading this, which contain a temperature above the given value if the mode is cool, and if the mode is heat, the temperature is less than that. So in this case, it spells out exactly what condition it's looking for. So in order to code this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set Boolean removed equal to false, right? Because I need to, at the end of the day, I need to return some sort of Boolean. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and set return Boolean removed equals false. I'm going to start that for loop. And my advice to you is whenever we're removing items from a list, work from the back of the list to the front. And then you won't have a problem where you skip any elements. So I set int index equal to the schedule dot size, right? And keep in mind, we start counting from 0, so you have to subtract 1 from that. And we're going to keep running this as long as the index value is greater than or equal to 0. And then we need to do the decrement at the end. So I'm going to set up that for loop. Now I'm working backwards in my array list. And then I bring in another object for a temperature action. I'm just going to call it change, just because we're changing stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and grab that schedule array list, and let's go ahead and get that index. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and bring over whatever object is in, say, that 0th element, or the last element here, because we're working backwards. Now I can go ahead and bust out my if statement, where it's going to say, hey, in the case that change dot get mode, right, dot equals the other mode, right? And this is the parameter for the function. When that's the case, then I want it to execute one more if statement, because now I need to check where the temperatures are in relationship to each other. So if mode dot equals is heat, and we get that more important thing, which is the change dot get temperature, right? Because when it's on heat, it tells you right here that if it's below a given value, when the mode is heat, right there. So that's going to be something we need to check for in this condition. And then we need to make sure we get that temperature in change, and we're going to go ahead and compare that to see whether or not that's greater than the temperature that's in the parameter. Okay, so I get temperature. Oh, sorry, this is for heat, so it has to be less than the actual temperature. And then while I'm in this same if statement, let's go ahead and compare it, because what if the mode is cool? So if the mode is equal to cool, right? So this is coming in from the parameter. And we get change that temperature. In this case, it'd be the opposite, right? So the temperature would be higher than the actual temperature in the parameter. We can go ahead and now finally remove from the schedule that index value. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and set removed equal to true. Let's turn that on. Right? Because at the end of the day, we're going to have to return some sort of response in terms of whether or not this thing has been removed. So if something did get removed and got scrubbed, we make it true. So that's what we'll return. So at the end, we need to return the value of removed, which will be true or false. And that's it. Good luck to you guys.